Hello, Stu Gibson.
Hi, Liz.
Stu, what do you remember about one, how we met, and then how over the years we've gotten to know each other?
Well, I know we met at the first NYU tax controversy forum, I think is what it was called in New York City. And I was there. I don't even know if I was on a panel. I'm pretty sure we met at the cocktail hour the first night, because I don't think we were on panels together. I don't even, I might have been on a panel, but I have no memory except meeting you that. And I think we met that night and we started talking. And I know your dad's a tax professional in New York City, and you were telling me how he's followed me, and we kind of, sporadically stayed in touch while I was at the Justice Department, and then I remember I have this very vivid memory of you coming to my retirement party when I left the Justice Department in 2013. I left in January, but I think we had a party in like February or March because somebody else had retired right around the same time and he was more senior than I was. You came to Washington, you took Adrian and me out to lunch, as I recall, at a very nice restaurant up on Capitol Hill. Then I basically dropped out of the practice of law and I ended up being a substitute teacher in Fairfax County Public Schools, where I had served on the school board for 16 years. And then I ended up as editor of Tax Notes International at Tax Analyst. I was looking to recruit authors and I was looking to meet people in Europe. And I think I reached out to you and you offered to basically be my Sherpa for my first trip to Europe in the winter of 2015. You introduced me to Diane Hay at PwC in London. And just as a side note, Diane actually came here to Washington about a year and a half ago to be on a panel with me at a conference that IBFD hosted with Kaplan and Drysdale at International Taxes. And it was a panel on privileges in cross-border matters. She talked about the attorney-client privilege under UK law. And it was really great to connect with her. But you connected me with her. You connected me with Isabel Verlinden in Brussels. You connected me with, I can't remember his name, in Lisbon. And then I spoke at a conference in Lisbon. And I think the only place I was that you were not was in Paris, because you had taken a train. I think that you had to go up to Scotland, if I'm not mistaken. And we spent a couple of weeks, 10 days, 12 days traveling around, and you basically helped introduce me to all really smart people at PwC, not just in Europe. I think there was a gentleman down in Australia you introduced me to because you were traveling quite often to Australia at the time. And then I've had about 3 different careers since then.
I remember, so I vividly remember the lunch at your retirement party because I remember you had actually sent me a text that it was coming up, and it was sort of a hesitant invitation. And I didn't know how serious you were. And I texted back. I was like, do not invite me unless you want me to show up because I will show up. And you said, oh, yeah, no, please, love to see you there. I think you were actually surprised that I went. And how could I not? Like, how could I not come to a celebration of you and I don't know that you remember this. So yes, you were absolutely right. We met at the cocktail hour the first day of the NYU Tax Controversy Forum in its first year of being, and now it's grown into something just absolutely remarkable. You were on a panel. You were on a panel with Jeff Nyman.
Oh, okay. He was on the other side at the time.
Yes, and it was excellent. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic event. Yeah, we just started talking because I'm a tax girl, through and through, and you're like a major celebrity in the tax world. Now, granted that it may not be the accolade that everyone would wish for themselves, but we know how special it is. And you did something remarkable. You took an interest in me. You took an interest in me, not just as a professional, as somebody in the practice of tax, but as a human being. And you are single-handedly responsible for my career going where it went and me actually becoming a partner. And here's why. I called you the day I came back to work after my elder daughter was born. I was close to tears, although I don't know that you picked up on that at the time, but you probably did. You have emotional intelligence coming out of your ears. And I said, Stu, I don't know that I can do this. I feel like, and it was not, and the funny thing was, it wasn't because I felt guilt I was actually really happy to be back at work. It was that when I expressed to other people how happy I was to be back at work, they were surprised that I didn't feel guilty. And I thought, well, maybe something's wrong with me. You're the person I thought to call. I called you up and you answered on like the first ring. And I said, I don't know that I can do this. I don't think I feel like I'm supposed to feel. I mean, maybe I just need to quit. I just need to walk away. Like, this isn't what I should be doing. And I was just getting myself all sorts of spun up. And you gave me some of the best advice that I've ever gotten and that I carry with me now. And I have shared widely. I apologize without attribution or royalty. The check is in the mail. And it's this. You said, Liz, this is a lot. This is a big moment right now. And you're sitting down. I said, yes, I'm sitting down. You said, okay. So you can take a deep breath. I said, okay, I can take a deep breath. And you said, you know what? You don't have to make a decision right now. Wait 6 months. You've got 6 months in you. Wait 6 months. Then see how you feel and make a decision then. But you don't have to make this decision right now. There is so much happening, and this is such an emotional time. If you do not have to make a decision in the midst of a deeply emotional time, don't. Give yourself the grace of kicking the can down the road. Now, that won't always be possible. You did qualify it because, again, everything comes with warranties and limitations, scope of services. I appreciate all the caveats. Your point was, look, not every situation gives you the gift of time. This one does. Give yourself the gift, hang in there, and then see how you feel. 6 months later, I was in the partner process. And I have used that advice on myself. I've given it to others, but you gave me such an incredible moment that day because you gave me permission to just let it be and let it work itself out and recognize I was not actually in a crisis. I was in a time that felt heavy because it was. And it was not a crisis. And I didn't need to make it one. Yeah, that was incredible. So I've looked at you as a friend, as a mentor, as somebody just I've looked up to for maintaining integrity in spaces where that is frequently challenged. Yes, your retirement party. How could I not be there? It was just a love fest of people for you and going to lunch with you and Adrian. And then we went to a museum. And it was lovely to spend time with the two of you. I know how much love you have to give, and to see that love, and then to see how love has blossomed again in your life. When I think of you, I just think of support, care, and just you love people. And I appreciate that you loved me in a time where I really needed somebody to show me how to do that for myself. And that's what you did. So I'm
You're gonna
just
make me
grateful to be
cry.
friends.
You're gonna make me cry. Let's be careful.
Oh, and then there was that ridiculous lunch in Belgium.
Oh, dinner. No, it was dinner.
Oh, it was so good. It was wonderful. And you met Elaine, and yeah, like, that's the best part for me is just I love it when all my favorite people get to know all my other favorite people because everything gets more awesome.
Yeah. It was, it's funny because I remember you introducing me to Isabel in Brussels, and I think I had 2 hours with her. I had to take a taxi out because your office was out on like the ring road. And we started talking, and I know you're not a lawyer and I don't have a master's in tax. But not only don't I have a master's in tax, I knew very little at the time about international tax. And she's grilling me about transfer pricing. And I thought I was sitting for my doctoral whatever in taxation at some European law school. And I'm I my daughter a lot of people my daughter's age think they have imposter syndrome. They think, boy, it can't be this easy. I must be faking it. And I thought, wow, I just hope she doesn't find out that I don't know this stuff. I hope, at the end of the day, she understood that I did understand the basic concepts and I was able to discuss them intelligently, which is why I was able to maintain a career in international tax for almost 10 years.
And you know that there is a Beanie Baby there was at one time, there was a Beanie Baby on the shelf in her office. When she and I first met, she made a comment to me about how I was the Energizer Bunny. all the energy, just the Energizer Bunny just never stops. And, it was at a conference, and after that conference, I went and I found an Energizer Bunny Beanie Baby, and I sent it to her, and I got the best email in response. I remember that, and I remember afterwards, you were like, "That was intense." I was like, "Yeah, she's intense. She's awesome." And what you're able to do, though, with Tax Notes International and, again, evolving your career from having been in the US Department of Justice and handling some, I mean, huge cases, landmark,
Hmm.
and then moving into the space of the tax press, really, and providing really meaningful insight sourced from diverse professionals in the field, and surfacing that insight and bringing it to people in ways that they could use, understand, apply. I mean, it's very much your gift is how you're able to take in information from so many diverse sources that may not be your métier, but you're able to bring it together and then really make it accessible for people, make it intelligible, even make it fun. I know people don't think tax is fun. They're missing out.
Well, it's funny because I tried when I was in court. I tried not never to take myself too seriously, and I'll just tell you a very quick story where basically I was humbled. Let me put it this way. So I was trying the Stobie Creek case in Court of Federal Claims in Chicago. We had a Christine Odell Cook Miller was on the bench, and of course, in the Court of Federal Claims, there's no jury. And I had my expert witness on the stand. He was an expert on options in foreign exchange. He sat on the boards of 5 hedge funds. He had like degrees up the yin yang. And I said to him, I said, so when you got your degree, your PhD in finance from, and I can't remember what MIT, I think it was, when you got your degree in finance, and he says, it's finance. And I said, tomato, tomato. And the judge says, no, it's not. So that's okay. I actually took a deposition once in a tax shelter case. It was the taxpayer's daughter. We were taking it in San Francisco at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I posed a question to the witness, and she posed the question back to me, and I said, I asked you first. And the court reporter later told me it's the only time she's ever cracked up in the middle of a deposition.
Stu, I mean, we could go through your CV, and it's remarkable. What's important to you that people know about you beyond what they see in your bio and your CV?
Well, I can say two things. I could say something that's more surface. I mean, I'm a choral singer and I love singing and I love music. As a matter of fact, I've got rehearsal tonight. But the other is I'm always looking for new ideas. I'm always looking for new ways to do things. I'll give you one quick example. I joined IBFD really in earnest in January of 2020. And I was actually in Amsterdam when the lockdown for COVID happened in March of 2020. I had one task that I had to do that I was assigned to do at IBFD. And when COVID hit, I couldn't do it because I couldn't travel and I couldn't network. And so I took a look at the way we did our news. And my undergraduate degree is in journalism. And I went to my boss and I said, who would pay us for this? And they used to call it DIY news. And my boss said to me, well, we take a look at it and rewrite the guidelines. So they didn't hire me to be a news editor. They didn't hire me for anything having to do with news. But we rewrote the guidelines, and my boss said, would you like to be chief editor for news? And I said, yes. And I ran a newsroom for 5 years. And our news, I would put our news up against any other tax news organization. My line was we punch way above our weight. So it's just a matter of finding those spaces where there's a demand or where you can put your talents to use, whether it's on the school board. I'm working on an initiative now where I'm helping some marketing efforts for a budding entrepreneur in California, and it's very energizing.
I'm I'm curious about that because you are someone who has reinvented yourself. And at the same time, you're still you. Like that's to me is the best part is that you have managed to translate your talents, your gifts, your interests what gives you energy, and you found different outlets for it. Some of them have found you, but I'm curious. So I didn't know about the marketing piece. What else do you have going on right now that you're excited about?
Well, I have two things in the works, actually. So I'm working with a young woman who this is an interesting story. She, she was a coder in the gaming industry, which is a very male-dominated field where a lot of women find it impossible to work because of harassment from male colleagues. And what she did was she worked for a company that made video games, and she saved up her money and she saw an opportunity and she created a way to prepare and file excise tax returns electronically. And she is one of a very, very small handful of authorized e-filers with the IRS for excise tax returns. And I don't know if you know, but there's, I think, 66 different kinds of excise taxes in the US across a whole range of industries. And almost all of them are filed on one particular form, a Form 720, which has a different line for each kind, and they're all coded. They each have a different base, they each have a different rate. The rates change all the time. And so she came up with a cloud based solution called Simple 720. I met her when I was doing some work at IBFD. And when I left IBFD, she reached out to me and said, I'd like to collaborate. And so I'm working with her and her team to try to get the word out because, I mean, right now she's in beta, but she's going to launch next month after the filing season is over. And you can file an excise tax return with her in 5 minutes for $40. People don't think of excise taxes, but last year there were 16 million excise tax returns filed in the US, covering everything from fly fishing rods to bows and arrows to tanning beds to motor fuel to airline passengers to stock buybacks to self-operated healthcare systems, employer-operated healthcare systems, and you name it, and they all have filed tax returns. So that's I'm helping her kind of get the word out.
That's really cool. And also affirms for me why to hang out in transfer pricing. I mean, it's all cost plus 5%, right?
Well, I
Yeah,
always
okay.
say,
I know that, like, such a fraction of my already fractional listenership will get that, and everybody else is like, the tax nerds have arrived. And yes, we have, and we are flying the flag proudly. That's really neat, and it's so fascinating to me too, how you get into the technology piece of it. And I think that there's often not just stereotypes, but also some reticence for folks who did not go through kind of the heart of their professional lives in an environment that was dominated by technology the way that it is now. And for you to have had quite a bit of your career in analog, and now that is digital. And I mean, I'm curious, how has that transition been for you? Because you are very digitally savvy, and yet when I think about the early days of your career, they were largely paper-based.
well, I still remember a huge bankruptcy case in Pittsburgh where I spent an entire week hauling around files in large leather bags to take to depositions to ask questions because there were thousands and thousands of pages that I needed access to. Now I can now I can carry everything around. I've just bought a new laptop last week to help with my new business, and it's been a challenging transition. There's some things I'm very good at, and some things I'm horrible at. I still write down notes on white legal pads, and but that's just out of habit, and probably can't find half of my notes. But I'm, I used to say this about foreign languages. I know enough to be dangerous.
I just remember, helping out around sort of as a para, whether it was around my dad's legal practice or I had a couple of summer jobs with with, attorneys who knew my dad, and I got hired on, and I remember hours spent bait stamping. And now, I mean, now the system just does that for you automatically, and I was like, "No, no, that was hard work." But
Uh,
that's no, I felt so empowered. I had the stamp. I mean, when I went and, I sat and took the notary exam and I had my own little notary stamp, oh, that was power of a kind that was just intoxicating for, an 18-year-old.
well, I was around when I had to ask the question, what is a bait stamp? So I understand what you're saying.
So you said there's a couple of things. So digitally enabled excise tax filings. What else
Yeah,
is
pretty
exciting?
cool. And then one of my it's funny. One of my former colleagues from Justice, we kind of crossed paths. I went from IRS counsel in St. Paul to the tax division at Justice. She went from the tax division at Justice to IRS counsel in St. Paul. And she's now working for a regional accounting firm in Southern California. They're getting, I don't know if you're familiar with all the, I don't want to use a technical term, but I will, hoo ha, all the hoo ha over the employee retention credit that was enacted in the CARES Act at the beginning of the pandemic. But the IRS has now taken to denying claims for refund based on a computer generated algorithm as to whether the claim is valid, untouched by human hand. One of the reasons that I call my business Actual Intelligence LLC, because there's nothing artificial about me. And so I'm working with this accounting firm and some other accounting firms to help get ready to file suits for refund in federal district courts around the country to recover wrongly denied claims or claims that the IRS is just sitting on and hoping the taxpayer will go away. This is kind of righteous justice as well, because I don't want to get too political, but when there's talk about abolishing the tax division, which has been around for over 80 or 90 years, it kind of makes me wonder about the future of tax administration, both at the IRS level and the DOJ level. So if I have a chance to represent taxpayers who've been wronged, and I actually did represent a couple of taxpayers when I was in private practice for a year and a half, in 2017 to the beginning of 2019. Interestingly enough, hired by a law firm that I beat in a large tax shelter case, because the attorney I beat called me up and said, I have to step back from the practice of law, and I have a client that needs help, and you're the only person I could trust him with. And we ended up getting an incredible resolution of the case. I can't go into any detail, but we got an incredible resolution of the case for the client. And so, when I was at Justice, my job was to do justice, and now that I'm out of justice, I'm still, and that's where I am.
Zealous advocate is a word that I think it's a phrase that I think is very applicable to you for what's right. A zealous advocate for what's right. Regardless of which side it happens to be on, you stand up for what is right, and you hold yourself to that standard too. I mean, that's one of the things that I've always admired about you as a professional role model. Frankly, similar to my dad in that way, in terms of you've had the opportunity. I won't, I say to go to the dark side, but I mean, you've had to hold the line in times where that was very much personally challenging and unpopular, and you've held it. And when I think about a time where holding the line has never been more important, and at the same time has never been more sort of fraught with risk and personal concern. I think examples of people who have maintained their integrity and held the line and continued to zealously advocate for justice. I mean, I think we need stories like that more than we've ever needed them before.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because the last time I was going to have an opportunity to see you, and we weren't able to do it because of thunderstorms in Houston, was when I was visiting and meeting with children who would cross the border, who were being held by the U.S. government until they could relocate with relatives in the U.S. And I was interviewing children who were at a facility, I think, east of Houston. And we just, it was, I remember, it had to have been 2018, and it was right before the election in 2018. Because when I turned on the television in my motel, all I saw were local political ads.
Yes, I remember that, and I remember those storms,
Yeah.
and of the kind Houston is famous for.
Yep.
Uh, One, I love the name of your company. I love the name Actual Intelligence because it is a little bit more than tongue in cheek, but it's very much your sense of humor, and very much also, I think, just your plain speaking way of conducting yourself. What this is you've been in private practice, but this is different than that. What what are you excited about doing through Actual Intelligence, doing through this business venture?
I mentioned two things, and obviously I'm open to other things. I'm really excited to return to the practice of law, except for a year and a half at Schiff Hardin in 2017 through beginning of 2019. I've been in tax publishing, so I really haven't used my law license. I've been a writer, a speaker, an editor, a manager. I managed the international tax team at Bloomberg for most of 2019. And it's funny because when I joined Bloomberg in 2019, I had lunch with a partner at a downtown law firm, and she said to me, "I don't think you've seen the last of the inside of a courtroom." And I knew she wasn't talking about me being a potential criminal defendant. So, and I have to call her up because now I have to tell her, yeah, I'm returning to the practice of law, and I'm really excited to get back and put my experience and my skills to use, for justice, for on behalf of taxpayers. And one of the things that I think the people I'm going to be working with are excited about working with me has to do with my ability to think strategically. Because there are thousands and thousands of taxpayers who have these claims, who have potential lawsuits against the federal government, and so you can't file them all at once. How do you pick what you're going to do? And so I put out a strategy that they've embraced, and we'll see how it goes. But I'm excited to kind of go back to that. Okay, now we got to think about how we're going to be in court. We need to think about what questions we're going to ask. We need to think about how we're going to shape our briefs, what positions we're going to take, whether we're amenable to settlement, that sort of thing. So it's just going back and putting on that hat that I was wearing for a long, long time.
And it does get you excited, I can tell. So, I'm curious, you know me, you know that I love nothing more than, again, introducing cool people to other cool people because I just want all my friends to know each other because I think that life will just be even better if that happens. Who do you wanna be talking to right now?
Oh goodness, and that's a tough question. I mean, I I can give you a category. I mean, I like talking to really smart people. I like to talk to people who have good ideas who are willing to act on them. I like to talk to people who appreciate what what I can offer and what I can do for them, not just what they can do for me. I don't have to go back to the practice of law. I can sit at home, although my doctor tells me that will shorten my life.
Well,
But
I also think that your spouse might like you to have a hobby as well.
well, we've had that conversation. I will say no more. But but no, and I have a hobby, and I have other hobbies. And if I didn't go back to practicing law, I would do other things. I would volunteer in the community. I can't believe I've lived more than half my life in Reston, Virginia, and it's hard for me to think of myself as a Virginian, except we do say we have two Virginias. We have Nova, which is Northern Virginia, and Rova, which is the rest of Virginia. It, People asked me when I was at IBFD, how long are you going to stay working? I said, I'm going to keep working as long as it's fun. And to me, the question is always, do you live to work or do you work to live? And I work to live.
Stu, I don't know that this part's gonna make it on the air. I love you, and I am
Oh,
so grateful for you and your friendship, and just we've both had pivots, and I mean, I don't know if you can pivot so many times that you're actually turned around and back in the same direction you were going to begin with, or if I just, ended up somewhere completely different. But I just appreciate that it seems that at every stage now of my life and career that we've known each other, you have had not just wisdom for me and insight and advice to share, but you've had care. You've had deep care. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you for it. And
Mm.
I'm excited to see where your business goes. I'm excited to see where you go. And I'm just really happy to be your friend. And I appreciate that you came on this little experiment with me.
Well, speaking of reinventing, you've had quite a ride as well. And it's funny because where you ended up is so different from where you started when we first met. I can just tell from looking at you. I mean, I don't see a lot of stress on your face. I see a lot of peace and serenity. Those are very important. And I see you celebrating the moments in your life with your daughters, and that makes me very happy. I see you're a lot more physically active than I ever was, and that's good for you. I will say this, my that I am eating healthier than I have ever eaten in my life because my wife makes them, and I'm becoming a sous chef now. I know how to rough cut vegetables, and I'm pretty good at it too. Should see me with a clove of garlic.
You absolutely remain fresh and vital and full of surprises. Thank you
And
for
I
this.
really appreciate reconnecting with you, and I was flabbergasted when you invited me to.
Stu, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And this was a lot of fun.
This was a lot of fun. We'll do it again.
Yeah, we will.
Love to the family.
Yeah, and mine to you.